Welcome to Moving Forward, conversations on culture, identity, healing, and hope. I'm your host, Linda Anderson, and I created this podcast as a space for real, heartfelt conversations with people who are reflecting, evolving, and boldly stepping into what's next. This podcast was born out of my own journey through seasons of loss, transition, and transformation, and my belief that healing happens when we come together to share our stories. My hope is that these conversations will inspire you to pause, reflect, and find courage as you move forward in your own life. Today's conversation is especially meaning to me. My guest is Kevin Gorman, and Kevin and I go back a long way. We went to high school together. Even then, he was someone people experienced as kind, steady, and thoughtful. He was on the track team as a long and high jumper and 4 years on the school basketball team. Although his athletic abilities was shared with others, what stayed with people was how he showed up for others. Over the years, that steadiness never changed. When my husband passed away 4 years ago, Kevin was one of the people who reached out, not with fanfare, but with care. That quiet presence is something I've always associated with him. Kevin recently retired from Novartis after a long career in multiple disciplines, spanning in environmental and healthcare. He now writes a Substack titled Rooted, Reaching, and Exploring. In his writing, he often begins with something practical, like tending a garden, and opens into reflection about attention, responsibility, and living thoughtfully. This conversation is about transition, presence, stewardship, and the ways we move forward, sometimes by changing direction, and sometimes by simply paying closer attention. Kevin, I cannot thank you enough for being here and giving up time to talk to us on this podcast.
Thanks, Linda. I really appreciate it. And I'm very humbled to be a part of this wonderful journey that you're on. So
So
thank you.
the lessons that you've gone through in your life and from school to things that you've gone through, what do those lessons still resonate with how you approach life today?
I think, when I was growing up and early on in life, young kid through teenager, before I became an adult, I learned a lot from my parents. And I think a lot of us can look back on that and say, we gleaned from our parents some important knowledge. And a lot of that knowledge as I became an adult may not have been active. It was somewhere back in my brain somewhere. However, now as I've moved later into life, I believe a lot of those lessons are being applied now into what I do. And so, some of these things are just one of the most important things right now for me is just the aspect of being outside, gardening, tending to nature, and being aware of that.
Yeah. You, like I said in the beginning, you were on the track team in high school as a long and high jumper, but later in life you ran 5Ks and half
Mhm.
marathons
Yep.
in your late 40s and your early 50s. There's something about distance running that mirrors life, pacing, patience, endurance. Do
Yeah.
you see yourself writing about gardening when you write about that, or about life through gardening and relating it back to as the patience, the pacing, the endurance that you gathered from running these 5Ks?
I think it's both. Again, when I look back, I've always loved sports, first of all. So all throughout my life, whether it was, track, basketball, playing baseball, pickup football game, whatever. I love sports.
Mhm.
Wasn't the best athlete, as a lot of my friends keep reminding me, but but I was always part of the team, and I love that. I love that concept. So then, as I move forward later, and like you said, into my later 40s, in early 50s, I started picking up running. And as you'll find out through this conversation, I try not to do anything halfway. So I poured my energy into that, um, and had some success with that, and achieved goals. And I think so as I'm doing my writing now, um, it's going to probably incorporate maybe subtly some of that information, as you mentioned, patience, obtaining a goal, which for me, I'd always say, oh, I have to meet this time now, this specific time, and I got to train for that. And now with my, as I explore my gardening, it's the same aspects, a little bit of patience, trial and error. Will this plant work next to this one? Um, but my goals, I have goals for what I'm doing with my gardening too. So it's going to reflect, I think, in the writing. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, so I think it will.
So when you do write about your gardening, you're writing not just as a hobby, but also almost as a relationship, paying attention and working with natural systems instead of forcing outcomes. When
Right.
did that way of thinking begin for you?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good question. So, and that's when I thought about like in our pre-interview. So,
Mm,
um, it started through osmosis, probably as a kid.
mm,
Again, my growing up, my parents, we were fortunate enough to have decent sized property. And on that property, my mom and dad had two pretty good sized gardens, vegetable gardens that they tended to. And what was amazing to me was my dad worked two jobs. He worked for government as a welder on a local government site where we grew up. And he also was a movie projectionist at a movie theater in Dover, another area we grew up in. But during whatever free time he had, he was doing stuff around the house, whether it was plowing the garden, etc. My mom had a job, she was doing the same thing. So through osmosis, I kind of learned a lot of this stuff.
mhm,
So it wasn't like I just became aware of this. It was always there. And then as I got older, started having a family, um, didn't really have time for that in a career. Didn't have time for that. But
mhm,
now as my career wound down and I now have the time, these things have come back into my mind. I also continue to learn and read certain aspects of how to plant, what vegetables work growing next to others best, and I practice organic gardening, and so I don't use any pesticides or herbicides, which comes from having 15 years of my career working in environmental. I came to understand the hazards that it is working with chemicals and how it's much better for us, the environment, to grow things organically. So again, some of it was through osmosis. Went to college for biology, so I had the science training
mhm.
there,
Interesting.
and always loved science. I never lost the love of science.
Yeah. You're writing and I'll go more into the Substack writing that you do, but
Mhm.
your writing starts with something practical. It starts with garlic, oil, observation, and then it opens into reflection. And I really want to bring out that word reflection because when we went to high school together, even then you were someone that people experienced as steady and kind. And
Mm,
it's a little emotional for me too because you were very reflective all the time. That's the way you
mm,
gathered those relationships that you had. So when you think back though to that younger version of yourself, what
mhm.
feels familiar and what feels different now?
And again, these are great questions. So back then, I appreciate the, the the kind words, Linda, because I'll be honest with you, I didn't think I was any different or reflective, because at that age you don't know that. You don't know this is the type of person you're being perceived to be. You're more concerned about do girls like me, or you know what I mean? It's like the high school thing.
Absolutely.
So I never really thought about that back then, but I do know I always grew up. Again, my parents were wonderful. I had three older brothers. We all I ended up going to a Catholic grammar school for kindergarten through eighth grade. And even though I'm not practicing anymore, I did learn a lot from growing up in the faith. And I try to still apply that to this day, which is just trying to be nice to people, want people to treat you nice. So I don't think I've ever changed. It's just I never recognized that back then, but now and I don't feel I have to try hard at doing it. So, some people may try, it's just, just being nice. You can be
Yes.
nice to people. So be a nice human being. That's all. But yeah, but back then I never perceived myself as being perceived as being reflective. Um, so thank you for those kind words. I wish
Sure.
I knew it back then.
Yeah. I think we often don't realize, what we are putting out there into the environment or
Yeah.
to the world. So
Yeah.
on that note, though, when you are able to slow down
Mhm.
enough to observe closely, whether it is in the garden or life, what do you notice about that people often miss
What do I,
by not slowing down, like slowing down and
well, okay, so here's the thing too. The word observe, and this is
mm,
a good word. I personally try to be observant, but I also am plagued with getting distracted very easily.
mm.
Because I want to learn about that's the way I am, My family would tell you, we go to a bookstore, I buy 6 books. I
Mhm.
may read one, but the other 5 are on a shelf, but I'll get to them at some point. But I just have to, I have a thirst for knowledge, whether it's, reading historical stuff, science stuff, fiction, whatever. I
Mhm.
just want to keep learning. And that's a problem at times because I don't focus enough. So now in this stage of my life, I really have, since I retired, I've now said to myself, take time, slow down, observe. I'm out in the garden and I used to put headphones on it. Now I don't because I want to
Mm.
hear stuff. I want to hear the birds. I want to hear, the chatter that's going, whatever. And sometimes it's just peaceful. So that's very meditative, right? So that's where I'm trying to be more observant. And my wife has worked with me hard on that. And, she's really good about it, where, again, she'll just say, focus, just focus on the one thing and bring that to completion. And Linda, I think part of the reason I've always been this way and in my career as well is I was, um, at certain times a project manager, and we were given these tasks, but we had to multitask on a variety of different projects. So it wasn't just focus on one project. It was maybe 6, 7 different projects for different um, companies that I was working for at the time. And sometimes you could never get things done. You're always in the middle of something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that fit into my personality, but at the same time, it hurts the personality of being observant. So now I'm trying to be more observant. And so taking the time now with again, the gardening aspect of it, looking at the environment, understanding what's around me, um, paying attention because there's a lot out there to see or hear.
You did mention your wife and
Uh-huh.
listening,
Yeah.
but were there people or environments or situations that did influence you, how you learned to pay attention to the world?
I would say yes, and then again, I forget.
Yeah.
I would always be reminded of this. My daughters too. My daughters have been good as I'm a father of 3, as you know, and um, having had no girls in our immediate family. Like I said, I had 3 brothers.
Mm,
My immediate cousins were all boys. Um, I didn't grow up with girls around, so having 3 daughters kind of forced me to be a little more observant in their lives, what was going on as they were growing up. And as you know, being a parent, it's difficult no matter boy or girl, but in the case of daughters, and it was pretty easy when, preteen, and when they got to teenager, and then it was interesting. So I became more observant there. And they've grown into wonderful, strong, confident women in their adulthood now, and I couldn't be more prouder. But yeah, I'd say they've been an influence as well.
For the listeners too, I really want you to understand or know that your Substack is titled Rooted, Reaching, and Exploring. And I
Mhm.
highly suggest people follow and read this because it's awesome. I think it's the fifth writing Substack
Right.
that came out this week. So let's start though with the word rooted. I want to go to the title that you have. Let's start with rooted. What keeps you grounded in the seasons of your life?
My family,
Mm,
100% my family. Everything to me is has always been. And it's not just my wife and my daughters, very close with my brothers. I have two brothers still alive. My one brother had passed, my next oldest brother to me. But we're close. We stay close. We're different, but we're close. So that keeps me rooted, and also friends would be second, right? So and then finally, now narrowing down my focus to a passion I've always had about the outdoors, nature, the environment, that's keeping me rooted as well. I want to really stay focused on that message of the environment and not just gardening or planting. There's other topics I will eventually address um, that are things that may impact the environment, right? And things we can be aware of. Maybe we can't change things, but we could be aware of. And I just want to let the listeners know too. I mean, right now the subscription is free. I'm not charging for it or anything. You can sign up for free. Um, and I'm not writing every day or every week. I'm trying to do every 2 weeks, and it may get even slower once the weather gets nicer here. But it was a nice
mm.
winter. It was a nice winter distraction. Let's put it that way. But I am getting good feedback on it, so that makes me happy.
Before I ask the next question, I have to say I just read the most recent, and I made a comment that I'm going to start a garden with my grandchildren, and it really helped me
Nice.
what you said. So I thank you
Nice.
for that.
You're
Um,
welcome.
the second word is reaching of your Substack. So even after retirement, life keeps inviting us forward in different ways. What are you still reaching toward?
Yeah, so I don't want to sound cliche, but it's like the meaning of life, right? That's
Mm,
we're now at that stage, Linda, where
yeah.
if I use if metaphor is the right word, you're the educator, you'll let me know. If metaphor is the right word, um, this we're in the final lap of the race, basically. If you kind of break it into, you're
Hmm.
running a mile, each lap is a quarter mile. We're into the starting our last lap, and so when I've reflected back, I'm happy with where I'm at, you know, from my career and also family wise and friends wise. But now I'm reaching to be a better me, and taking care of myself better than I've done in the past. Because I've always been more, caring, concerning for others, and that there's nothing wrong with that, right? But there's a time for you need to reflect for yourself and your own mental and physical well-being. Um, what can I do better? So when I'm no longer here, maybe I've planted seeds, using another metaphor from the garden. Maybe I've planted seeds with people that'll make them grow and continue or become better human beings, right? So that's what I'm reaching for. And will I ever get there 100%? No. I don't think any of us will, but it's worth trying, right? So,
Definitely. So the third word in the title is exploring.
yes.
And exploration doesn't always mean traveling or adventure.
Right.
Sometimes it's curiosity. But what are you exploring now that
Hmm.
perhaps you didn't have time for earlier in life?
Yeah, right. So it's not necessarily traveling, right? Even though traveling, let's say, whether it's domestic, international, wherever it is, everything. that happens when you do that can, if you observe, you can open your eyes to see good things, right? And try to apply them in your life, especially like internationally. And we've done some, quite a bit of international travel, and it's good to see different cultures, environments, how people live, et cetera, to open your eyes and realize, hey, we're not in this little bubble here, right? But it's also the travel part is one part of the exploring, but it's also local travel. So go for a hike
Mhm.
in the woods, right? And what do I observe there? What do I see? And again, I'm trying to do this. Sometimes you don't. You're just walking along and you miss something.
Mhm.
But now I'm trying to look to see, like, look for I'm kind of getting into foraging a little bit, mushrooms, um, different plants, herbs that you can see out in the wild, and they're out there, free, right? So just becoming more observant in local travel and applying that to the overall stewardship of environmental nature type of stuff, right?
So that leads to this next comment that I have is in one of your recent pieces also, you do talk about stewardship and caring for an environment that we share.
Right.
But how has that idea shaped the way you live beyond the garden?
Yes. So that's going to be a subject for one of my future Substacks. I'll use one example here, and it's not about planting. It's plastics, right? And how plastics really impact our environment. And are we going to get rid of plastic? No, it's never going away. But you can become more aware of certain aspects of plastic. For example, single-use plastic. How many times are we taking, Poland Spring bottles of water, one bottle, you throw it away. Boom, that's it, single use.
Mhm.
Um, Containers you get from takeout, single use. A lot of times people try to keep them, but they throw them away. Um, the part of recycling, I mean, the big industry has put an interesting onus on all of us, basically making recycling our problem, not theirs.
Yeah.
A lot of the plastic we go to recycle, if it's food grade plastic that can be recycled, a lot of the other stuff can't, and a lot of people still recycle it, but it goes and it has to get sorted out. It may get mixed up. It's just a whole um, big topic of discussion, quite honestly. So what I'm becoming more aware of is plastic, how I
Mhm.
use it. How can I maybe instead of getting yogurt in a plastic container, is there yogurt that comes in glass? And there is. So now I buy the glass. Glass is recyclable. So it's just more about awareness than it is preaching. So that's how I'm trying to put that into my life and then just slowly let people around me know without preaching because nobody wants to be preached to.
Right.
And that's one thing I'm trying to do from a stewardship perspective.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there'll be other things, but that's a big thing with me right now is the whole plastic problem.
Yeah, and I love that you do that service and like you said, stewardship, because it does just watching you and hearing you will help inspire other people. So my wonder though too is some people find tending to living things that they restore them in ways they didn't expect. So my question is how working with the natural world ever helped you make sense of harder seasons in life?
Yes. Okay. So yeah. So the aspect of, being patient as a gardener, sometimes things don't work, like you said. I mean, you could plant tomatoes one year and they look great, and the next year they're not as good. And there's a lot of factors involved there, right? But there's also patience and a lot of this time of year, especially in New Jersey, Linda, as you can imagine, the last couple of days it's been very warm out.
Mhm.
Everybody wants to get out in their gardens and like, all right, got to plant, got to plant. No, we're still going to get cold weather, still potentially snow. You got to be patient. Um, that concept never really applied to me in my job. Um, Although it did when I was managing a lot of people, so that I did have those aspects to um, consider when I was a manager of a lot of people. But it applied to me outside of gardening in life. And I did mention this to you when we talked, pre-talked.
Mhm.
Um, my youngest daughter had a battle with cancer several years back, and she survived, thank God. Um, but the whole process, because I wanted to fix things quickly, because that's the way I feel I am. I need to fix things, or that's the way I was in my career, etc. Got to get things done, blah, blah, blah. With that process, we had to be patient. And literally through the whole process of chemo, stem cell, post recovery, and it's 9 years later and she's doing great. But it taught me more about patience, which I think came because of me slowing down. And at that time is when I had started getting back into gardening. So it really, the two of them kind of went hand in hand, so to speak.
Well, you're sharing that and the word patience, of course, slowing down. But I'm just curious, were you always inclined that way?
No.
Okay.
No.
No.
I would like to think I was, but again, I think there's that fine balance with me, Linda, of um, again getting back to observing versus getting distracted, and there's that fine balance. And I think I at times I'm very good one way on being observant, being patient, etc. And then the other ways I'm not. As a father and a parent, I was pretty patient, and a husband, although my wife may differ with that a little bit. But we've been married over 40 years now, so
Yeah.
something's working. Um, but but I am aware of it a lot because I consider myself very empathetic, right? So
Mhm.
I'm aware of it, but there's also part of my personality that if I feel like I get impatient if I feel I can't get something done
Mm.
right and help the people I care about, right? So it's that fine balance. Yeah,
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to the retirement part too. So you did retire from Novartis in November of 2025 after
right.
many years, as you stated, in healthcare. Did retirement feel like stopping or like making space?
Definitely not stopping. Making space. I would say now I have the space to do what I want to really do.
Mm,
Um, Whereas before, you still have your job responsibility, right? And even though I stopped my career, my to-do list never stopped. My to-do list has now grown, but now it's organized. I stay focused. There's no rush. I I said to my wife, I said, I don't know how I got my work done at my job with all the stuff I have here. And that would happen over the years. But
right.
um, I, I haven't stopped, right? So, but it's given me the space now and the deep breath that I can take internally
Mhm.
to really focus on what it is that's going to make the most impact, not just for me and make me happy, but hopefully others. So that's what I'm doing.
Thank you for sharing about your daughter and that life experience. And you
Right.
shared about others. Does those life experience, do they show up in your writing, even when you're writing about something as simple as the garden?
So not yet. Again, uh, my passion, I think, as I told you, was um, right now has become growing garlic, believe it or not. And it started about 8, 9 years ago with 50 garlic plants, and now I'm up to close to 1,300. Now, people think I'm crazy at the community garden I belong to, but I'm like, no, there's a reason I'm doing this, and the reason I'm doing it is to give back because my when my daughter was going through her cancer, she had to go through a stem cell transplant. We had to find a match. It was pretty difficult times. We also worked with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society at the time. So what I'm doing now is I've built myself an inventory of garlic now, where my goal is this year to go to a farmer's market, sell the garlic. All the money would go to the proceeds to the which is now called I wrote it down here because I forget their new Blood Cancer United, they're called now, and then the National Marrow Donor Program. So that's my goal. And like I said, I'm passionate about it. I'm also giving the garlic away. So my neighbors love me, my family loves me, but and friends, everybody gets some. Nobody's getting cheated. But my goal is, even if it's $300, $400, that's money I'm giving back, and I want to keep doing that. So
One of the four words for this podcast is conversations on culture, identity, and then healing and hope. The healing and hope is what I wanted to pull out for you also, because
mm,
definitely the healing and the hope of moving forward that you're encouraging all of us. So,
mm,
on that note, though, when we
mm,
had our pre conversation, you said to me, you're not sure that your story is one people need to
mm.
hear. And I disagreed. And so, my question to you, though, is why do you think quieter lives often feel less worthy of telling?
Right. So, and this is a little complicated because, and I thought about this since we last talked
Mhm.
as well, and I feel like you're my therapist, Linda, now. So, um, but seriously, my whole life, you know, as far as I can remember back, people think I'm extroverted. I'm not. I'm an introvert.
Yeah.
I do not like being out there. And although people no, no, you're an extrovert. No, no, I'm not. It's very painful for me to be socially engaged, right? And at times, so it's always been a mental challenge for me, to be honest.
Mhm.
However, you get through life on that, and okay, you recognize now I'm really recognizing who I am.
Mhm.
So part of me, I'm not quiet. Like, my friends will laugh if they heard this. They'll be like, "He's not quiet." They they do know, though, deep down, that it's it's my defense mechanism to survive, basically, right? However, why I didn't think this was worth people to hear, I am a good listener, right? Usually around friends and stuff like that, I'm a good listener, and try to offer advice when asked. I don't like to just give out information. And if I do, I give it out, but small chunks. But I'm uncomfortable talking about it myself.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I we we've never been the type that have shared about our successes of our kids, and we listen to others, and that's fine. And we recognize that's who we are. My wife and I, we're very similar. Um, but so I'm not sure that answered your question,
No,
but
definitely, for sure.
yeah,
But
that's why I felt like,
yeah.
hey, there's so many people, I listened to like I told you, those kids that were talking about the science stuff they're doing. Oh my
Yeah.
God, I was blown away by their discussions.
Yeah.
Um, Listening to Gus Perna, and Teresa Culinary, what they've done. I say, my God, these people were so, what do I have to, yeah, what do I share?
I'm sure the listeners are hearing this and hearing, yes, you have a lot to share and a
I
lot for us
appreciate it.
to learn from you. I mean, I just love the garlic, growing it and then giving it back because of your daughter and what you went through with that.
Yep.
Sharing that story is very impactful, how
Yep.
you healed as a family through it, through that journey.
Oh yeah.
So,
It's tough.
so what I'm wondering though is how do you balance though being rooted in what matters while still remaining open to what's next?
Yeah, I'm always adaptable. So
Mhm.
like I said, however, I really try to stay rooted in what my goals are now. And like I said, it's family, friends, and now the environment. Those are my three big things. And what can I give back? And you know what can I do while while we're still here to make an impact? Part of that too, Linda, is we talk too. I still coach. I'm coaching at actually I've practiced in a little bit coaching track at a local high school here.
Right.
I like working with the kids, talented kids, some kids that not fast, whatever. But I also like talking to them about school.
Yeah.
What are you guys doing? How's it going? And again, being careful because we know in the environment today you have to be careful. You don't want to hurt kids' feelings and et cetera. But I want to get to know them other than just the athlete, right? So I find that, and then I can plant little seeds there about the environment, oh, that plastic bottle you just left littered on the track, pick it up,
Yeah.
um, things like that. So that's and being adaptable, I think I'll always be adaptable because things happen in life, right? And you just sometimes you have to change. And we did when my daughter went through what she was going
Sure.
through. Life changed a lot in a good way at the end, but it didn't seem so at the time, right? So
So, is there a question that you find yourself sitting with?
yeah, right. And I kind of touched on it here. Take care of myself
Hmm.
mentally and physically. I want to make sure that I'm good. Whereas before I wasn't really doing that, you know. So that's the big thing for me every day. Like it's not just about me, but at first thing is take care of me physically and mentally, and all the rest from now will fall into place. So that's kind of where I sit at right now.
So, let me end with this final question.
Uh-huh.
If someone listening is entering a new season of life, whether it's retirement, transition, or uncertainty, what would you want them to know?
Take time, be patient, right? Um, Make sure you're happy with yourself, you're comfortable with yourself. I don't think that matters whether you're retiring or still working or you're in high school. Try to be happy with yourself first. And I think just try to be a better human being, right? That's what we all should be thinking about.
Definitely.
And but I think if you try to take care of yourself, things will fall into place. And I wish I did that when I was younger, but you learn,
Hmm.
right? And you hopefully have mentors around. And that's why I have so much respect for you and all teachers, right? Everything you guys do is you're out there, you're educating. So
You are too, though. I hope you can give yourself the props that you deserve because
I
you are definitely
appreciate
doing
it.
that.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Yeah.
I always have a hard time with ending these conversations because I could go on forever and ever. But Kevin, I want to thank you though for this conversation and definitely for the way that you reflect on life with such steadiness and care. It has, whether you believe it or not,
Hmm.
it has continued from when I first met you, which was in high school. You just have that steadiness about you. What strikes me the most is that you don't speak about growth as something loud or dramatic. And I know listeners are hearing that.
I
You
appreciate that.
you
Yeah.
speak about it as something that's cultivated, like through attention, patience, that word came out so much, and a willingness to stay present. And that got brought out too. So thank you for that. You remind us that moving forward doesn't always mean accelerating. Sometimes it means noticing more, which you definitely are doing and have encouraged me to do. Thank you. So you say, I was your therapist, you're also mine. Sometimes it means tending what's already there. And sometimes it means showing up. And I know you show up for so many people. I want to thank you for your sharing your perspective with us. And to our listeners, I hope this conversation invites you to slow down just enough to notice something you might have missed, to consider what you're tending to in your own life, and to trust that steady, quiet movements count. And until next time, thank you for listening and thank you for continuing to move forward. And again, Kevin, thank you for giving this time.